and thank you for joining us today. This is our conversation on the role of women in mental health and their contributions to the history of community behavioral health. And we are here to celebrate Women's History Month, so we are super excited. I'm Dr. Faith Dyson-Washington, and I'm the CEO at Community Behavioral Health. And for CBH's 25th anniversary, we partnered with an organization called History Factory to tell our story, and they are on the call today. So we're excited about that. As an extension of this work, we've invited women who have created and shaped CBH to have a discussion about their contributions to CBH and the Philadelphia behavioral health system and the field as a whole. So we have Estelle Richman here and Nancy Lucas, Dr. Jill Bowen. Joan Erney couldn't be here today because she had an emergency, but she's in our thoughts, and you will hear about some of the things that she has done as well, because she was definitely one of the pioneers as well. So for those who do not know, let me orient you to CBH, or Community Behavioral Health. The Medicaid, we're the behavioral health Medicaid payer for the city of Philadelphia. So we serve nearly 100,000 members annually, and presently over 750,000 residents of Philadelphia are eligible for Medicaid services. And so that includes mental health as well as substance use services. A couple of reminders for today. For those listening to today's presentation, all attendee lines will be muted and video will be disabled, but we do want you to participate. So we're looking forward to your questions. You can put them in the Q&A. We will have some time at the end where we'll be able to take a few of those questions and have some dialogue with you. So before we dive in, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves. Please give your title when you worked for CBH, or alongside CBH, or your current title. And I will ask Estelle Richman to start us off. Then we'll go to Nancy Lucas, and then we'll go to Dr. Jill Bowen. So Estelle, please introduce yourself.
My name is Estelle Richman. I've been and had a long history with the city of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The CBH basically became a 501c3 in 1994, responded to the state RFP in 1996, and went live in 1997. So it's very fitting that we celebrate the live performance of CBH 25 years later, after that first historic move. At the time, through all of this, I was the Commissioner of Public Health for the city of Philadelphia, but changed positions 3 times while I was in the city, from the Commissioner of Public Health to the Deputy Managing Director for Human Services, and then as the City Managing Director. So all of it, I think, helped establish and maintain CBH as a vital interest in the city.
Thank you, Estelle. Nancy?
I turned it over to Nancy, who I hired in 1992, I believe, to actually be and help create the part of the system.
Nancy Lucas retired from CBH, and as Estelle said, she brought me to town in the latter part of 92 to bring up managed care. No idea at that point that we were going to be a managed care organization. We had to figure out what bringing up managed care meant. So I started out as my title was program director. I was on the payroll of PMHCC. Once CBH was incorporated, and before we went live, but I'm not so sure when, I transitioned into being the COO of the organization. And then after that, transitioned to the CBH payroll. And then I believe it was January 1st of 2000, I became the CEO. It probably should be at least mentioned that there were 2 women CEOs before me.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Nancy, too. We've been talking internally about creating a founder's wall with the pioneers. And so really making sure that we include everyone that was, key to the startup.
I don't know whether or not it's appropriate, but before we had CEOs, we had two phenomenal women consultants who helped us create CBH. And they might as well have had the title of CEO. They were so important to the role.
Great. We'll be sure to get those names as well. Dr. Bowen?
Hi, great to be here with you all. I am the current commissioner for the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, DBHIDS, and I began in the commissioner's role a little over 2 years ago now, so it's right in the middle of the pandemic. We can talk a little bit about what that was like. I came to Philadelphia from New York. Okay, I can tell my accent. 5 years ago, when I learned some of the work I was doing in New York, working for the mayor's office there, learned a lot about what was going on in Philadelphia and felt really drawn. The exciting things happening in Philadelphia, including what was happening at CBH, there's really an awareness nationally and internationally about what is happening here. So I came as deputy commissioner, and in that role, was secretary treasurer for the CBH board and as commissioner president of the board for CBH. So really a unique relationship between the city of Philadelphia and community behavioral health. And it's an absolute treasure. So really happy to be here with you all today and to talk about it from a relatively newbie's perspective.
Well, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, we partnered with History Factory, and Katie Runyon is here from History Factory, so we're excited to have her here. And Katie, I thought you could kick us off just talking about what the process was like as History Factory really helped us to capture the CBH story. And what was it like in particular to interview so many of our strong women leaders?
Yeah. Thank you, Faith. Yes, I am Katie Runyon. I'm from History Factory. I'm a creative director at History Factory. And to give a little context about our relationship, History Factory is a creative and communications agency, and we specialize in capturing organizations' memories and telling stories in a way that compels action. We surface the core stories, memories from organizations that point the way forward to their future. And so spoke with so many different people throughout the CBH legacy history. We like to say that we start with the future and we work backwards to look at what's always been true about an organization and how that propels the organization into the future. So in practice, that means a lot of listening and research as well. So we listen to history, challenges, concerns, and then translate those experiences and stories to meet the organization's goals. So as humans, I think a lot of people have heard this before, but as humans, we are hardwired to remember stories better than, facts and figures. So that's a really compelling way, and I think a very wise way to share CBH's legacy. We often call the insights that we glean from this process, we call them golden nuggets sometimes. So sometimes these insights are a little bit harder for organizations to see themselves. Everyone that's working is living this day in and day out, and it takes this kind of pause to sometimes recognize what you have. And the insight that we gleaned from working with CBH is that the lived experience of your leadership, of these incredible women, that was the golden nugget. That's your DNA that sets you apart, that makes you so unusual. And so, you have a huge mandate to serve all Philadelphians in the Medicaid system, but also to really be an exemplar for what's possible. And so, the goal with the videos, which I believe we're going to be watching today, is that correct? Yep.
Yes. So
we'll get to watch some of the videos that we put together and with many of the incredible people sitting on this panel and some others. And it just, I think elevating those stories and seeing you all talk about your history and your future in a way that is very personal and very much cognizant of the fact that you are all whole people, and you bring that experience to your work, and there's a deep commitment there. I think that was really unusual, and we do this for companies all over the world, but that's what sets CBH apart. So I will just last kind of thought on that, just add, I think there's been a shift. There's a recognition now of all of us as whole people in the workplace, right? And I don't think that could be more true with any organization than it is with CBH. You bring your backgrounds, your current life circumstances, these personalities that have so shaped from Estelle and Nancy and Jill and Joan and many other people, and today with you, Faith, but with many other people as well, bringing that whole person to the work that you do and the commitment that you have. So that's just a little glimpse into what it was like, and it was a true pleasure. And History Factory absolutely thanks everyone that participated.
And thank you. We were so fortunate to be able to work with you and look forward to what we're going to be able to do in the future. But yeah, I wanted to really kind of use that context to kind of cue up a couple of videos that we want to share today. One is a video that we did on the first day of CBH. And then the second is a video on CBH's impact.
In the beginning, the way the stories are told, they had to get so many people on the same page, right? To buy into this idea that people were even having a hard time conceptualizing, how's that going to work? What does this population need? How are we going to begin to address, gaps in service?
People in Philadelphia weren't excited about having the hospital closed. It was a determination that we were going to close this hospital the right way. We wanted to move everyone to the community and not move people in a trans-institutional one state hospital to another. If we hadn't done the closure of Philadelphia State Hospital, I couldn't have done CBH. It's that simple. That money from the closure was what was the groundwork funding for CBH.
So between August of '96, when we turned in our proposal, and December of '96, when we were supposed to be up and running, that was an awful lot to do. Hire staff up, train, and then the state delayed it till February.
We were still minimally staffed, but we were staffed. All of the departments had staff. We had leaders in all of the departments. 9 o'clock on the night before, we're having a party. Everybody's there, everybody's waiting for the phone to ring. We were up all night, and the state made an error. They had put our phone number in instead of the managed care numbers in for people to call if there was a problem. So the first 48 hours, the phone rang constantly. We weathered that over the next 2 days, and finally things settled down. Our staff, the hospitals, took our referrals. We approved hospital stays. We approved other things. It was a dream come true in that sense. We were up and running.
We had such visionary leaders in the beginning that we had a chance to really create community behavioral health.
Great. That video came out so well. This is our second video.
Philadelphia is a extraordinary place. We lived and breathed Philadelphia, and our mission is really solely to make a difference in the lives of people there.
The goal is long-term recovery. The goal is whole health. That kind of connectedness is why the work at DBHIDS, including CBH, is so mission-driven. It's so passionate and commitment driven. It's very dynamic, and we improve all the time.
We now connect people back into the community, services within the community in the kind of way that they are adequate and sustainable. And this idea of CBH now brings, what I consider to be a focus, a perspective to the delivery of behavioral health care.
I really did love the resilience of people. I mean, you would talk to folks and story after story about what challenges folks might have had, but they got to the other side of it. And it's really quite amazing. CBH is an unbelievable gem that nobody really knows about. The only reason we existed was to serve the people in Philadelphia.
It also has a lot of very passionate people, a lot of passionate providers, strong advocacy network. And I think all of those things, as you're seeing with CBH, when married together in the right way, really can make some incredible things happen in a way that you won't see in other cities.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed those videos as much as we did. And thanks again to History Factory. This was a passion project of mine. I think when I first came, I said, oh my goodness, such rich legacy here, such rich stories. So as Katie, as you mentioned, to be able to capture that in this moment, in this pivotal moment, to share that story, to talk about the past, the present, and the future of CBH. We're excited to do that. So, and thank you all panelists for contributing and joining. So let's dive in. We've given some context. And again, I know Joan wanted to be here today, but I'm sure we'll weave her into our conversation. But I'll start with Nancy, because as in the video, you were here in the very beginning. So I'm wondering if you can walk us through in greater detail some of the challenges that you were really facing leading up to that first day, and talking a little bit about what it meant to be a woman at that time. How did that impact some of the decisions that you were making or your ability to influence in that moment? Because I know you had to influence a lot of people that this was the right thing to do.
To be 100% honest, when we went live, I don't think we knew what we were doing. There was no playbook for us at all. There were a lot of tough questions that we had to answer for the state in our RFP response. And the answers there led to how they graded us and, whether or not we were going to get a contract. And a lot of those questions were around numbers. For example, how many staff are you going to have in each department? And you needed to justify how you would have them. Well, if we were and I believe we truly were the first anywhere, there was no playbook to go by. So you ask, how did we do it? I don't know. We made up some numbers and we lived by them in the beginning, but we really didn't know how many care managers to have or how many member services staff to have. We hired as many as we could up to the limit of that we put in our RFP proposal, and ran with that, and then kept working on it for the next few years and moderating it. What was it like to be a woman? There's no magical answer there. I've had a very different career. I took a look back as a result of your questions, and I realized that through my career, total counting CBH, over 50% of my bosses have been women over time. I think that's a bit unusual. When I came into town and we needed to obviously partner with the providers, the coalition and the alliance, which were the two and maybe only two at that point, trade organizations of providers, were both run by women. In the coalition, about 50% of those providers were run by women. And in the alliance, many of them were run by women. So I think that really made some things a whole lot easier. And as I reflect on some of the challenges I had, I didn't have as many challenges with the organizations that were run by women. I got lucky there, really lucky.
Yeah. No, I think that's important for people to hear, Nancy, just in terms of, because I think, again, across the city, across nonprofits, across behavioral health programs, that strong, women leadership has been in place. So to hear you speak about, sounds like you were probably able to make those connections, make things happen, take those educated guesses to figure out what was needed at that time. Yeah.
The one place I can tell you that I feel like I ran into problems were in the hospital systems. And we had maybe at least a third of the hospital was run by women and the rest were run by men. I clearly had problems making inroads into the hospitals that were run by men. With the women, no. Some of them are my friends today. It was clearly much easier.
Yeah, and I would dare to say too, Nancy, that healthcare, particularly on the hospital side, probably still is very male dominated right now. And so being able to deal and get those relationships and do what needs to be done is important. But thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Because I know some of that came up in the interviews too with History Factory, but just really how trying and how pioneering it was to be, a woman leader in that space. And really, like you said, there was no blueprint for what was happening at that time. But I'll pivot now to Dr. Bowen, because I wanted to ask too, and again, this builds on what Nancy was just saying in terms of just a great leadership, women leadership that is in the city. If you could describe what it's been like to serve as the DBHIDS commissioner during this time. And we've said it's a pivotal moment. People are talking about whole health and whole person-centered health, and mental health is health. And so just really describing what it means to be commissioner at this time and how you see your role moving the Philadelphia behavioral health system forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Faith. And really, really good to be here with you all. I do want to say that, so I became commissioner 2 years ago. When I first came as deputy commissioner, I entered a senior leadership team that had been all male, the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the other deputy commissioner. And when I became commissioner, it had been 17 years of male-run DBHIDS, not CBH, but DBHIDS. And that was interesting. Having Joan, so Joan's not here, I'm going to talk about her because it was really great for me to come in as deputy commissioner and then to shift over, but I got to experience Joan. So walking into a somewhat male-dominated leadership at DBHIDS, there was Joan at CBH. And the styles are different. And when I talk about male leadership and female leadership, you always make some certain generalizations. But I do want to say that the passion, the sense of family, the sense of being in something together, thinking very systems-wide, the whole mission-driven, working together, we achieve it together, it is a very nurturing aspect of that. It is palpable, you can feel it. And I think for women employees, it's really important for them to see the ability to rise and grow within these organizations. We focus on wellness. We have wellness units. We have very intentional efforts to look at wellness, and that all was prior to the pandemic. So I became commissioner right in the middle of the pandemic and right on the heels of the Walter Wallace killing. And it was quite a challenge for the organization as a whole, and for our ability to be responsive to a community that is in tremendous amount of distress, experiencing behavioral health distress, experiencing behavioral wellness distress as the stressors continued. The traumas are multi-layered. We talk about them as being multi-layered. We understand that. That put us in a unique position to rise. And DBHIDS as a whole, CBH in particular, rose. And the way in which they rose was, one, being really flexible, pivoting really in a extremely nimble and not just responsive, but also deeply supportive of both the provider network, the people that we serve in Philadelphia, and of the staff, to say, how do we put our arms around all of this so that everybody is bolstered up during this extremely difficult time? That took a number of different forms. It took very quickly establishing virtual approaches. It took checking in very regularly to see how people were doing. It allowed for a lot of flexibility around family needs. And it also allowed us to create responsive programming to meet the realities of what was happening on the ground. That included standing up an alternative payment arrangement that in meetings, talking about what would be needed so that the provider network survives this. Everybody was at home, and people weren't going to their therapists' offices anymore. They weren't going to the group work. They weren't. And the intentional conversations around, we will not let this provider network fall. We will not allow people to have no place to go and to not have support. It was deeply, this is what I talk about as mission-driven, passionate, deeply caring. This is extremely difficult, but absolutely a commitment where there was no option for us to not be there, strong, capable, and together. So that was the experience of this very difficult pandemic. And as it continued and continued and continued and continued, it was constantly a need to work in this nimble and flexible way to be matching what was happening out in the field.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think too, Dr. Bowen, that's one of the things that, I'm proud of, to have come in October of 2020 to witness some of that, and also be a part of really making sure that the foundation was there. I always say CBH is such a Philadelphia story, and we continue to persevere and kind of hunker down and do what we need to do for the residents of Philadelphia. So.
And you were hired right as the transition was beginning, and I was asked to step in as acting at that time. And so you came on board, and I was starting a new role, and it was just really good to have a partner in that way, to really also see things through some new eyes in this very unprecedented circumstances that we were in.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll pivot to Estelle. I wanted to ask you, Estelle, what was it like being a woman at the time, founding such a pivotal organization? Again, Nancy spoke to the fact that, no one had done this before. Of course, the county could have hired an existing organization, and Philadelphia steps in and says, no way, we're going to build our own Philly-made CBH. But when you think about those first conversations and the idea of CBH, when it was forming, I guess I want to ask, what are your biggest drivers? And particularly as an African-American woman, can you talk about the journey to having a seat at that table at that time? And Estelle, you're on mute, so just take up.
Still on mute. Again, no doubt that was brilliant, but we didn't hear it.
It was a really unique period of time. We had just come off of closing Philadelphia State Hospital. We were at the very still beginning of a Robert Wood Johnson grant for chronic illness that had as one of its 5 tenets managed care. So we immediately began to discuss the role of managed care in the city of Philadelphia. We had some pretty good data that was brought together by a Richard Searles, who became famous in the managed care world. New York was where he left Philadelphia to go to New York. We had a lot of data coming out of the University of Pennsylvania, and we had a mindset in the state of Pennsylvania that this had to be done by the corporate world. As Mayor Rendell came in with his chief of staff, I really was able to say this would be good for Philadelphia, but I also had behind me at that point in time a lot of very, very strong people in the form of Loretta Ferry for AMI as a very strong family leader, Joe Rogers leading the consumer, and any large number of both legal advocates and programmatic advocates who were not going to let the system in Philadelphia continue to exist. I would tell you in the end, I used being a Black woman to my advantage, but there was a point where, and I think Mayor Rendell would tell you, he and David Cohen were at a 49-51% whether this could exist. The city council president, John Street, was at no way. This has to go corporate. We have the corporate folks at the point were saying, how could you let a Black woman with no experience and no background run what was at that point a $500 million system? And Ed, at that 49-51%, decided to let me have a go at it. And I think part of it was he had met with a corporate person who had the nerve to say in front of the mayor, how could you let that Black woman do this? And I think that was so offensive to the mayor that he was determined to let the Black woman do it. It was tough during those days. The city was fresh out of bankruptcy or near bankruptcy, not bankrupt, but very close. We were asking for city to take risk ourselves, and no other of the other counties were anywhere close to this. So we were asking for people to trust us, to be able to put together a system for the people of Philadelphia that would emphasize people first and insurance second. I think that's where Joan had her major problem with me as we started, because I insisted I didn't want to be an insurance company. I didn't refer to it as an insurance company. I was not going to be bound by Medicaid rules. I saw this as a system to serve everyone, and that we would not ask your insurance when you came in. Made the state crazy. But in the end, it wasn't that we won this one, it's just that we didn't do it. The key was to integrate these systems, which was why in the end, all of us basically fought for having a behavioral system rather than just a managed care program. It was important that all the systems get integrated. I think that overall, as I look back, the success of CBH is because it brought everyone together. And when everyone has a stake in it, when everyone sees where that stake is, they fight for what they believe. And consequently, the providers, family members, consumers all fought for what they believe. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't mention one of the women who I think actually made it happen in the end, and that was Councilwoman Marian Tasco. As I said, the council president wasn't so excited about this. And at one point we were writing RFPs to contract it out. And if it weren't for Marion Tasco as councilwoman right now, I'm not sure where we would have been. So I always have to give her credit and the other Black women on council for fighting and making sure this didn't get contracted out.
No, and such a great story there. You speak to just a rich legacy and history within city council, Tasco being a part of that. But thank you for that, Estelle. I hear that. And to the theme of trust, when you said, let me have a go at it. So appreciative that at that time, Brendel, and others really supported. And I think that speaks true for women leaders, period. Let us have a go at it and demonstrate that we can get it done and that we can bring people together, because I think that's one thing that we do well. I would be remiss, Estelle, if I did not mention that though I know you were technically in retirement, are back with the city of Philadelphia in your newly appointed position by the mayor. So just wanted to give a little bit of time so you can tell everyone what you're working on now, and how maybe even CBH kind of formed some of the ideas and infrastructure or the knowledge that you're using in your present position.
Thank you, Faith. I did step out of retirement. Everyone thinks I failed retirement. I have now reached a point where I admit I failed retirement, but only for a period of time. I've agreed to come back into the city to work and focus on gun violence. I think my specific focus is working with beginning to focus on people who are most likely to shoot or be shot. I think part of the reason they asked for my return is one of my skills is to bring groups together, to integrate, to have people all focused on one message and to amplify that message. And in the city right now, we have many, I think, effective programs for gun violence. I do think, though, they aren't all woven together in a way that we can demonstrate our effectiveness. And part of my role over the next several months is making sure people understand the programs. Everyone can cite our vision and our mission in this, and that as we approach the election of a new mayor, that we make sure we've protected our programs that are most likely to be successful. We have an unfortunate history sometimes in this city, is that as we change administrations, we are prone to eliminate sometimes effective programs without looking at them deep enough. So part of my initiative is not only to integrate, support, and to get everyone on the same page, but also to make sure we have strong constituency support for maintaining those programs that are successful. Much of this was what I built a system on both here in Philadelphia and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I think the history of where we come from and where we're going all works to the hopefully the benefit of Philadelphia, listening to consumers, listening to our provider systems, and figuring out how do we keep and maintain people on the same page.
Thank you for that, and such important work. And I agree with you, Estelle. We're at such a pivotal moment just in transition for our city. And we're in a recovery phase as well. And so how do we address the issues that are important to our residents is going to be key moving forward. But let me ask a last question before we open it up to take a couple of questions from our audience. And I'll pose this to all three of you. As you look back over the years, is there any particular moment that is like your CBH proudest moment? And then I'll tag on to that, a hope for CBH as we continue to serve Philadelphia. And perhaps I'll toss it to Nancy first in terms of when you think back, your proudest moment and maybe a hope for CBH moving forward. Nancy, you're on mute, just so you know. Yeah.
I don't think I have one proudest moment. It's more of a very good feeling and a pride in my staff and how well we all work together. We struggle together. We were good comrades. We cared for each other. And it felt really good to run an organization that had so many people that cared both about their clientele and about each other. My hope for the future, that camaraderie continue to exist, and that the staff that are frontline with clients be not afraid to reach out and do whatever is necessary to help clients. If I were there today, I would still be an advocate of breaking the stupid rules that the state or the federal government might have. You can ask forgiveness later. In the meantime, your job is to help the clients. And that's what I would hope for.
Yes. Thank you for that, Nancy. And thank you for the courage to bend those rules, some of which we were talking about earlier have changed now, but it takes courage to be able to push against what is. So thank you for that. Dr. Bowen, yeah, your thoughts just in terms of proud moments of the system and CBH and our future. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that the theme, when I listen to Estelle and Nancy speak, it runs through. It's like a river that still keeps flowing. That incredible sense of people first. Very much an organization dedicated to serving. And so in the middle of the pandemic, that was number one proud moment. Like you're talking about things like COOP planning, continuation of operation. That was about how do we make sure everybody's okay? I mean, that was the moment. So I pulled everybody together and we're all, how do we make sure everybody's okay? Internal to the organization, external to the organization, the provider network, the people that need our services. How do we rise? And this is in the midst of everybody not knowing what was going to come, but knowing what we had to do. There was no question about what we had to do. And I think a lot of that comes from that flow of this is who we are, this is what we do, and we serve. And I think that, going forward, that serves us really well because we continue to be in unpredictable waters and in, difficult places. And, the vision that I brought as commissioner, which is what we call TEC, TEC, it's addressing trauma, achieving equity, engaging community, guides every aspect of what we do and very intentionally making sure that all our system transformation efforts align right there. Is actually very much in alignment with the sort of reason that CBH exists, is successful, has grown, and has such an extraordinarily positive impact on the city of Philadelphia. Whether you're talking about fiscal impact, quality impact, clinical impact, it is like that's why I call it like a gem or a treasure. For this city, and those in the city sometimes are the least aware of just how beautiful and special it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm working on that. I know CBH, when I came on, I said, whoa, I'm not sure people understand what a gem that we have in the city. And so I think we're making progress and folks are learning who we are and how they connect. Estelle, your thoughts on, big moments in future.
Well, first, I want to say, before I forget it again, thank you to both you, Faith, and to Katie. The fact that you sought to have the History Factory do this, I think is incredibly important because it is history. And I get very concerned that those of us who started this and are getting older, that no one will have this recorded and they will not hear our voices. So the fact that you made this opportunity possible, I think is important for the history, not only for women and Black women, but for the city of Philadelphia to have this as part of the history. you know, when I was in the city, but during this particular period of time, people often refer to CBH as my experiment. And they would say, is your experiment still working? Is it still out there? And the prediction at one point was when I left the city, it would collapse and the mayor, city council would find a way to, quote, sell it to a commercial entity. So I always had that fear that something would happen to it. And when I moved from the city to the state, and while I had moved from oversight to funder, one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that CBH and our commitment to all of the counties maintain the same. And I have to admit, Joan was a strong partner. She was probably one of my strongest deputies, and she knew, both of us knew how much passion we had, not only for Philadelphia at the time, because nothing really happens without Philadelphia in this state, but how we could make sure that the managed care concept was spread to all of the counties. And I give Joan a great deal of credit for making sure every county had that right of first choice and to create. So my proudest moment was hitting that 10th anniversary, because at that point, I knew it was never going away, that there was enough strength both within the city to fight for it and enough strength at the state to make sure it would be okay. The second moment was probably when I left the state. This was 13 years after CBH had been created. It was going strong. It had good, strong leadership. It had passionate people. It was still run by women. Arthur was there, but the CBH itself was woman driven. And at that point, I was totally convinced and very pleased that we had weathered every storm we needed to weather, and no one was going to again ask, is your experiment going to work?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And I can understand how just after all that effort to stand it up, the concern would be, is it going to last? And it has lasted.
Remember, most new businesses, this was a new business field. And this was a unique new business that there still is not a lookalike to this in the country. No. So thank you for all of you who have picked up that ball and run with it and continue to make this a one of the kind.
Yeah. And thank you for having the foresight to push ahead. So we wouldn't be here without you, but you know that. I see our time is dwindling down, so I will just say we are looking forward to working with History Factory moving forward. Again, as we've documented some of the history here, and we have a lot more footage that we're going to be creating and putting out on our CBH Story website. We're also going to do a second chapter that involves our member experiences and our provider network. So again, telling the fuller story of CBH and all of the stakeholders that are involved. So we're excited about that, and we're definitely going to keep you posted on that as well. I will pivot us, and maybe we take a couple of questions from the audience while we have our panelists here and we have a little time left.
Yeah, so there's actually a question in the chat about how do you maintain your confidence when working in male-dominated spaces? So anybody on the panel can answer this question.
You know, when it was a very male-oriented, was I supposed to have lack of confidence because they were males? It never occurred to me. I was raised by my father, but my mother and my grandmother were very strong women. So it never occurred to me that men were supposed to be intimidating. So I never faced them that way. And it was, I hope I passed that on to my daughter, my granddaughter, but I think maintaining confidence or not having confidence is a learned trait. And I think all of us as women need to make sure that not only we say we're equal, we are. I actually like the quote you sometimes see from Ginger Rogers. She did everything that Fred Astaire did. She did it backwards in high heels. So The reality is we can do just as much, just as well, maybe better.
I'm going to jump in on this too, because I really want to use this as a moment to talk about how important it is for women supporting women. And, you know, there's such a powerful need for mentoring, but even beyond the mentoring is just the support of one woman to another in the workplace. Even when there's a question like, oh, I don't know if I should apply for that. Yes, apply for that. Or I don't know if I should be on that team, or I should, you know, be on that steering committee. Yes, you're going to be great. You're going. Those kinds of things make a huge difference, because what we know is that men who are not quite qualified for a position will go and try for it anyway, and women tend not to do that. A little bit of help or support might be enter. And I also think as women leaders, it's really important for us to value some of the things that are not traditionally valued when you look at what contributes to advancement in the workplace. So collaborating, looking and choosing to collaborate and being successful as part of a team, as opposed to individually, like, excelling and soaring. And if you're in a leadership position, as a woman, and you see the value of what women sort of naturally will do differently, you want to elevate that as what you consider to be important in leadership qualities. And so the way in which we all can support each other, I think, helps people really advance in a way they may otherwise just sort of step back from.
Very true. Very true. It's a great question. I'll just tell, I had a meeting last week. We had a partner, external stakeholder come in that wants to do a pilot with CBH. I walk into my boardroom and there's 8 white men, and gentlemen, how can I help you? So, speaking to what you said, Estelle, just believing that we belong in those spaces, that we have a right to those spaces, that we are conveners, and that we can create together is important, and holding on to that. So thank you.
One question I picked up in the question box was, do I expect CBH to last? Did I expect it to last 25 years, and do I see it continuing indefinitely? And the answer is yes, but I do anticipate change. Just like, again, for 1 millionth time, we're changing the city charter because it needs to be updated. Periodically, everything in CBH also needs to be updated. For example, as Jill talked about, looking at a different way of funding during a pandemic or a strike means that you step up in a different way. The biggest challenge now, and I am confident that CBH and the behavioral system can meet that challenge, is how do we become better integrators of healthcare? I know periodically people talk about carve in and carve out. The issue isn't carve in or carve out. The issue is, how do we integrate? How do we make sure we recognize that this is one body? We have to be able to live entirely within our bodies, which means physical health care and mental health, drug and alcohol, behavioral health care have to be dealt with together. We're figuring that out. I'm not sure we have all the answers yet, but there's no doubt in my mind that the women of the CBH of today can figure that out and continue to have success.
I agree. That's the important and challenging work of the future, but we will get there. Yeah.
And then we have one last question before the closing remarks. It says, many of you spoke about passion. This is often perceived as emotional and in turn negative in women. How do you balance passion in leadership positions, and how does this look like?
I wanted to say you change that perception, because passion is strength, absolute strength, and integrating the heart into what you do, and having that type of empathy and speaking to people from the heart is an absolute positive strength. And that's why we need to we need to change those rules again, whether they're written rules or they're unwritten rules. They're not necessarily the best way forward. So let's be clear what is.
And again, I want to chime in on that. We cannot let other people define who we are, what we are, and change what we say or do because we want to match somebody else's description. People often, they will see a man as assertive and a woman as aggressive. I don't accept that. We state the way things are. We will stand up for them. We fight back when we feel that anyone, not just us, are being taken advantage of. And hey, I like passion. I look for passion. I hopefully help people model passion because that's what gets things done. And I do a lot of mentoring of young women. And one of the things I talk about is having that energy and passion and never let anyone take it away from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's joined us today and to our esteemed panelists. I've been grateful really to follow in the footsteps of strong women leaders here and have been grateful to have the support of all of you as well. Also like to thank again History Factory and Katie for joining us. We're looking forward to that next chapter. And I think too, I want to encourage everyone to continue to check the website as we post more information about the CBH story. Remember that there's going to be a recording of this event too that's going to be on cbhphilly.org. We were pleased that you were able to join us. To all the women and men that are here, here's to the future of healthcare and behavioral healthcare. Please know now that I am at the helm, I will continue to build on this legacy, not only to have a seat at the table, but I dare to say to create tables and invite people to those seats. And so the future is challenging and there's uncertainty, but one thing is certain, we will continue to do what we need to do for citizens of Philadelphia. And I'm honored to serve in this capacity. Thank you all again. Wishing you a great Monday. Thank you to our panelists, and we hope to see you again soon at another event. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Carol.